We're live with Demetri Karagas, co-founder of 30 Madison. It's also awesome to have you here today, Demetri.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So for those out there that don't know what 30 Madison is, maybe we could start with just a quick overview of the company that you guys are building. And then from there, would love to dive a little bit deeper into your story and learnings as you've developed as a leader and entrepreneur.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I mean, at 30 Madison, really, you know, our vision and what we're looking to build is to be the premier healthcare company for people with chronic conditions. And the way that we've done that, and really kind of what we've created at the core is a new care model, right? Where we take and we combine specialist level telemedicine, personalized treatment delivery, and ongoing condition management. And we deliver that through a brand that's focused on a particular chronic condition. It's really designed to be something relatable and accessible to someone who's experiencing a particular condition. It's kind of come to life thus far. We have four brands treating four different chronic conditions today under the 30 Madison platform. We have one called Keeps, focused on hair loss, one called Cove, focused on migraine, one called Evens, focused on GI, and most recently launched Picnic, which treats allergies. These are four that have started today. I think they've been good proof points that show the versatility and the effectiveness of the model, and there will be more to come. And we really, we aspire to have, at least one offering that's relevant for every single American kind of over the next couple of years. So four so far, but not stopping there.
I love that. And we connected through Cove, which is focused on migraines that we've did a partnership with on the brand side for JOON, but definitely see a lot of relevance in terms of the other places that you guys are focused on providing solutions for. Thought we could maybe first start around just how 30 Madison was created. Did you start with Keeps as the first brand? It feels funny that like all of a sudden we saw all these companies, or at least a couple different, Row, Hims, starting with hair loss, and then all of a sudden, like over a couple year span, and maybe with the pandemic, this expansion into other categories of health. So can you tell us a little bit about the genesis story and maybe how you got into different facets of health?
No, for sure. And, hair loss was the first brand that we launched, but there's a reason the company is called 30 Madison and not Keeps. And the reason for that is that we always kind of had this plan to kind of, build brands for different conditions. But we started on hair loss, and that was frankly the one that got us. It was a hair loss kind of experience that got us really kind of thinking about the concept and that care model I described that became 30 Madison. And what happened was, Steve, my co-founder, and I, we were at Google at the time. We'd kind of decided that, we knew we wanted to start something at some point, but we weren't sure exactly what it was. And, we had been brainstorming a few different ideas, but it was actually, Steve kind of going through the experience of starting to lose his hair and kind of doing what folks often do when they have almost any condition, right? You go to Dr. Google, you kick the can down the road, you kind of look for what's going to happen out there, and you kind of feel a little lost, right? And then, he was fortunate enough to have, a family friend that's one of the world leading experts in hair loss and restoration, which, while probably overkill for a guy in his late 20s starting to lose his hair, there's nothing like that experience of going to the expert, right? Someone who can, really help you understand what to expect, answer any questions that you may have, and then you leave there with a real plan, right? And a real plan of kind of knowing how you're going to be able to treat the condition. And as we started talking about that, there were kind of the two, big realizations that we had. And the first was that, most people are not going to have that experience. Most people don't have that sort of access to a top specialist. I mean, look, if you're not in a city with, like New York, where we're located or things like that, you may have to travel hours to go to a specialist, right? Let alone being able to get an appointment in a reasonable amount of time. So that was kind of the first thing. And the second being, obviously, this whole kind of experience it's not a hair loss problem, right? This was a more systemic healthcare problem. People aren't able to get access to a specialist. People aren't able to kind of affordably get access to the treatment that they need and kind of the ongoing support that they need for a chronic condition. And that's when we kind of started thinking about, okay, what does that mean? Like there has to be a better way, and what could it be, right? And we kind of went through this process of exploration where we said, do we need to create a better telemedicine experience? And we said, well, yeah, that's important, but what about the treatment, right? Then you still need to be able to get the actual treatments, and you need to get that in a convenient and affordable way. And then we said, okay, well, do you need a better pharmacy? And we said, well, no, there are better pharmacies that have good experiences out there, but what about that? Then you need to know what to take and when to make adjustments, things like that. So, we kind of put the pieces together. And then what we kind of settled on was that, what really needed to exist was, a single place that you could go to that would be the best place to treat a condition, where you could get your questions answered, where you could talk to an expert whenever you needed something, where you could get the treatments delivered, you'd have that ongoing support. You needed all these pieces together. And that's when we said, that's what we want to build, right? And that's when we kind of went down the journey. And that's why we said, we're going to start with hair loss. But even if you go back to our very first kind of when we were thinking about kind of leaving to start this and talking to investors for the first time, we said, hair loss is going to be our proof point, right? Hair loss is going to be this first one that we do. But what we're really building here is a platform to kind of create these experiences that can be the best place to go for a particular condition. So you're right. It is interesting that kind of a lot of things kind of started in that place, and everyone's kind of gone in a bit of a different direction. But for us, it was, hair loss was really about this first kind of example of our care model in action. And that's why when we did launch a second business, I mean, a lot of people were like, wow, migraine is so much different. And we said, yes, it is, right? And that's kind of the point, right? We believe that this care model is versatile and, can be kind of applied to a wide range of different conditions.
And then how did you decide to get into the migraine space? Like, so you guys are operating Keeps, and at what point in that journey and how were you doing the research to be like, okay, we need to get into migraines next? So then from there, how did you decide to get into also GI, gastrointestinal?
Yeah. No, so we, it's interesting. We actually made this decision to do migraine, and at the time, Evans was focused more on just acid reflux. It's expanded now, but it was acid reflux. We kind of made that decision at the same time, right? And we said, and part of it was that, like I said, from the beginning, we knew we wanted to do more, but, as you asked, like, how do we pick those? I think the migraine one was a really interesting one. And we really, migraine is an incredibly complex condition, right? It is something where, what we saw as we spoke to patients and we kind of looked was that people were, they were going from doctor to doctor. They were going to try to find something that would help, and they weren't, they weren't finding something that was working, right? So you were having people, they weren't necessarily new to the condition, right? Which was a little bit different from hair loss, where most of the people that are coming to Keeps have never treated their hair loss before. The people that were coming to Cove, and as we were doing the research early on, the people kind of with migraine, they knew they had migraine, and they were looking for something that would work, and they weren't able to find that kind of expert. They weren't able to find that kind of ongoing support that would kind of work with them throughout the journey of getting their migraine under control. And we said, look, we looked at it, and when we dug in, we saw there's less than 500 headache specialists in the entire country, right? Wow. There's 40 million people with migraine. So, I mean, if that's not an access problem, I mean, come on, like it was just like, it was incredible for us that we saw that. We said, that's wild, right? And as a result, people aren't able to get that kind of specialist level of care. And we said, look, that's, we can do it much better, right? We can help someone kind of get that kind of level of support that they maybe have been looking for years. And then secondly, the other thing that we found that was interesting in migraine was, there was finally starting to be innovation in the space, the treatment side, right? There hadn't been kind of for, really since people started using Botox to treat migraine, there hadn't been anything new coming out. But then there has been over the last few years, this kind of new class of drug with the anti-CGRPs that was coming out. And we said, look, again, because there's not enough specialists, there's going to be kind of this sort of gap in patients being able to get access to what can be a potentially life-changing drug. And that was something that we weren't sure exactly how that would work at the time, but we said, this is going to be an interesting space where we believe we can really help, people that have been, suffering from this debilitating condition for often a decade or more, get the support that they need to finally, get their condition under control. And then what we hear a lot of times on the co-feedback is people saying, getting their life back, right? Getting weeks of their of a month back because they finally have the condition under control. And when we saw that, and we saw kind of where the gaps in care were in the market, we said, look, this is something we believe our care model can really make a difference. And we wanted to kind of go into a condition like that where there was a real need, and that's why we decided, the second thing we would do. Yes, it's very different than hair loss. But it was one where there was a need, and we've been really excited about, I think the impact that we've been able to have on a lot of the folks that come to Cove.
Convincing someone to trust digital care or online care. It sounds like there's wins that you guys are already seeing in terms of people experiencing the positive effects and coming away with these life-changing stories. But where are the biggest challenges that you're trying to overcome as a brand in terms of gaining trust?
Yeah. Look, one thing I'll say, it's been really interesting. And I think over the last year and a half, it's no secret, right? With COVID, there was this people kind of having to go to telemedicine and digital health out of a necessity, and then experiencing the power of it, right? And this is true for both patients and providers, right? And a lot of providers who I think, maybe in patients who thought, oh, telemedicine is for people who are lazy, or telemedicine is for people, just want something really convenient, actually kind of going through, because of COVID and kind of the lockdowns and whatnot, having to use telemedicine, coming out of that experience saying, wow, this can actually be a better experience, right? This can actually be a way to deliver a higher quality of care in a lot of cases when it's done right. So that's been one thing that's been a catalyst, I think, for the whole space. In the long run is going to be really, really positive for patients. But to your question on what we've had to do, look, I think it's down to education and making sure that we keep the patient at the center of everything that we do, right? Because we have to deliver a really amazing experience, and we have to be able to show that the outcomes are there, right? And we do have people that come in, sometimes they say, hey, do I have to also go to an in-person doctor? Is this something I can do? We say, well, look, no, we've worked with some of the world leading experts in migraine on our kind of clinical advisory board. We have our the medical director and the doctors that are working to provide a very high quality of care. And we believe that when you actually look at the experience that someone has on Cove, compared to kind of a lot of other experiences out there, we can actually provide a higher standard of care, and we can drive a better outcome. And a lot of that comes through the power of digital tools, asynchronous telemedicine, ongoing support. We kind of have this concept that we think of as continuous care, right? We think that, and when someone comes in for the first time, sometimes when they are wondering what it will be like, then they realize that, wait, I went through the initial consultation, but now I actually have another question. I can just ask it, right? I can just message my doctor, and the same doctor that saw me in my initial consult is there and will answer. I can do this whenever I need. I don't have to wait 6 months until my next appointment. What? They're just surprised, right? And it's something that when you think about your experiences with the healthcare system more generally, usually you go in, you go to, if you do get this appointment with a specialist, you leave. If you forgot a question, good luck,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's where these people kind of get this experience of the magic, right? And something that's really amazing when we see kind of the qualitative feedback and the anecdotal feedback that we get from patients is often things like, finally, a doctor that I connect with, someone that answers my questions. And that's the power of digital health and telemedicine and technology, where we're able to provide the tools to the providers so that they can scale themselves, right? And it can be pretty powerful because, there is always kind of sometimes when people first come in, they're like, wow, this is, is this going to work? But they go through the consult, and it's about really making sure that we hold a really high standard. It's not something that takes 2 minutes to go through, right? I mean, it's an extensive kind of questionnaire. You actually upload videos of you doing various kind of neurological tests. It's comprehensive, as it needs to be, right? And all of that is kind of, it obviously gives the provider kind of the clinical diagnostic inputs that they need, but it also is confidence boosting for the patient, for them to see like, okay, wow, this is asking a lot of these things. And they go, and then they have that, I think where the magic really happens is once they kind of make that connection with the provider and they realize they can ask those questions, they have a resource. And when you also think about our care team and whatnot, you have a team there that's with you along the way. And that's why, 30 Madison, something that we do is, we're not urgent care or things like that. We focus on chronic conditions where it is a journey. The first treatment might not work, right? That's kind of part of something that happens with chronic conditions. But, I think what our, anyone who kind of uses one of our brands knows is that they'll have someone there, right? They can, they'll have someone on that journey to help them get to that point where it is working. And when we deliver that, person after person after person, that's where you kind of build that trust within the community. And so, like I said at the beginning, it's really about, really focusing on patient experience and trying to drive a really high quality outcome that can be, and yes, we use the word enjoyable, right? Not a word that's often associated with healthcare, but we believe it can be and it should be. And I think that's how you kind of continue to show that, telemedicine can be really powerful as a way to expand access to really high quality care.
And as there's this explosion of brands and companies, many venture backed, coming into the telehealth space, what kind of advice can you give to patients, or what do you think patients should be mindful or wary of as they're vetting the right company to go to about their mental health problems, or to go to about their acne? Because as the space, I don't know if it has to do with the regulation, you see companies giving things like SSRIs via telehealth, or you see companies giving things like ketamine via telehealth. By you being on the operating side, what do you think you can say to patients who are vetting these options to be wary of as they're thinking about where to go to maybe solve some of these things that they need help with?
Yeah. And look, I mean, I will say that I think as, the technology is better, you can get more kind of diagnostic inputs through a telemedicine consult. There are more and more things that can be, I think, effectively administered and really high quality care delivered via telemedicine. You can do that. You can do it at probably a broader set of conditions that people maybe initially think. That said, I do think that, like, something that I think about, and this is kind of goes to what I was talking about with how we built the trust on Cove, is, as you're kind of going through a consultation, whether it be an asynchronous one or a video chat or anything like that, it's, how does it feel, right? Is this a, when you think about the comprehensiveness of the data that's being collected, for a higher acuity or a more kind of serious condition, it should be more, right? And that means there's going to be like some, there should be things that you have to do as a patient. It shouldn't take, 30 seconds to kind of complete a small form and then you're getting a prescription, right? That sounds strange, right? And probably it is, right? So I think part of it is like, as a patient, you kind of know that, like, look, yeah, there is a lot kind of going into this. These are things that it is going deep into my condition. And then I think a really important thing is the connection with the provider. Something that we believe is really important is that, whenever possible, when someone comes into any 30 Madison brand, but I think it's particularly important for one, like Cove, for a condition like migraine, is you get to build a relationship with that provider, right? We keep you matched. It's not some sort of round robin where it's just whoever's the next available person churns something out. It's about saying, hey, you're matched with, Dr. Crystal, whoever the doctor is, right? And then you kind of go along and that provider knows you, kind of has, been working with you along the way. If you've had to kind of titrate your dose, or if you've had to change something, they kind of know that history for you. And so, as kind of you come in, if you see that, like, hey, it's the same doctor, you had another question that was a follow-up and it was the same person, right? It wasn't just another person that kind of is putting something out. that's the kind of feel I think that's important, particularly as you mentioned, some of these kind of other sorts of things that are kind of being treated via telemedicine in any sort of chronic condition, I think. And that's something that, if you think about the initial kind of wave of, call it telemedicine 1.0 or whatever it may be, where more the urgent care stuff, that wasn't as important, right? With an when you go in with an acute issue, you have an ear infection, something like that, you get matched with someone, you come in, a few months later with something else, it's less important that it's the same physician, right? Or the same provider or whoever it is. Whereas with a chronic condition or kind of one of these more kind of serious conditions, I think that kind of continuity of care is important and something I would say, I would look for if I was using one of these services.
And when it comes down to cost, how do you think about that maybe long term with the way that a lot of companies and I believe 30 Madison as well is you're kind of revolutionizing this world by creating an elevated experience that's more streamlined and then having folks pay for it out of pocket as opposed to within their insurance plan. How do you think about that, today? And then as you scale, do you foresee that as continuing to be the model or does this stuff start to be covered by insurance?
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. And there's a lot of different views on this kind of across the space, I would say. I mean, look, we very intentionally started, with the consumer, and we wanted, as you just said, we wanted to deliver a really good experience that people would pay for and they would find value in, right? We knew it had to be affordable, and we think that we were able to use, technology and kind of scale to deliver a price point that, even though someone was coming out of pocket, was affordable and at an experience that was better. We think that a lot when you think about digital health, something that I think when it's done well, there's not necessarily a trade-off between quality and cost. You can do both, right? And that's something that because we were cash pay, and hair loss is one thing where insurance is not typically covering something like that, but for other sorts of conditions that we operate in, often in a lot of cases insurance would cover it. So someone was having to kind of go out and decide to go out of pocket, right? So that means we had to the bar was that much higher, right? And we wanted to kind of show that we could provide that level of experience, that level of outcome, and at a price that was affordable. That said, I think that as we believe, especially as we go into kind of more conditions that are higher complexity, higher acuity, and these sorts of things, insurance is going to be important, right? And people should be able to use their benefits when they have them, right? So, we believe that it'll be important for a lot of conditions for people to be able to do that, for companies like 30 Madison to really have the scale of impact that I think we have the potential to have. We need to kind of work with players within the healthcare system, and it can be kind of a win-win-win, right? It's good for patients because they're able to, use their benefits that either they're paying for, their employer paying for in some sort of way. Like, it's good for the insurance companies because, we are able to deliver, and we think the kind of results, we're demonstrating that in the conditions that we operate in today already, where we're able to deliver a better outcome at a lower cost. That's it, it's positive for the insurance company. Obviously, it's great for us because we're able to, expand access to our products to a wider set of patients.
Yeah, it's sort of wild for the individual or a company to be paying, these hundreds of dollars a month and then to be able to get better bang for their buck on something that's completely out of pocket, like outside of those hundreds of dollars that should typically maybe cover some of these things that move someone's health outcomes forward. It's an interesting sort of crossroads to be at, and I think that's what also gets us excited about what 30 Madison is doing as a brand connected to sort of what JOON stands for as well.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I mean, it's and you see, and I think what's exciting is you see, I think, employers and folks starting to kind of see that and wake up to that a little bit more, especially over the last year and a half, as as I mentioned before, as people have, just a lot, firsthand experienced, the power of telemedicine and what it could do to expanding access, kind of getting people the treatment that they need, and then as a result, kind of getting the outcomes that they're looking for.
Yeah. Would love to switch gears a bit. Something we talk about at JOON is sort of how the health and wellness of the exec team, of the founders, sort of trickles down into the culture of the company, and the wellness of employees. So curious to learn a little bit more about your journey and what's gotten you to this point. Someplace that could be fun to start is just around an exercise that we do called Rose, Thorn, and a Book. Just understanding, Rose being something that you're grateful for, excited about, Thorn being something that maybe is challenging you and something that you are looking to improve, and then Book being something that you're learning. It could be a book that you're actually reading, or it could just be something, maybe a little bit more high level. Oftentimes we see that these are all interconnected. So would love to throw that Rose, Thorn, and a Book your way if you're up to dive into that.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think, in terms of what I'm, excited and grateful for, I mean, look, I think that, something about kind of working in the industry, and I'm sure you can speak to this as well. It's like, it's really the patients, right? It's really kind of the experiences that we're able to see in terms of what the impact what we're building has on people every single day, right? We actually have kind of we have a Slack channel called, Why We Do This, which is where people can share, obviously kind of not with any, kind of anonymized kind of examples of stories that we're hearing from folks. And it's one of the most active kind of channels that we have. And it's just this thing where, you're able to see tangibly kind of, why we're doing this, right? And I think that it's exciting too to see kind of, that I think I'm, really kind of proud that we've kind of built a team of folks across the company that's why they're here, right? And that's kind of why people are doing it. And that's something that I think really kind of, it's not easy building a company, right? It's not easy kind of like, doing a startup, right? And there are ups and there are downs and there are great days and there are bad days. But when you kind of think about kind of, the impact that you're having when you're in this kind of space and you see it so tangibly, it's really motivating, right? So that's something that I think is just continues to excite me every single day. In terms of kind of what's challenging, look, I think, something that I've been saying lately is I feel like, and this is probably the case for a lot of companies in the space, is, our business has grown a lot faster than our company, right? Like we have, which is a good problem to have, but it is a challenge, right? And it is something where, when things are moving so fast, right? I think, it's like you have to keep up, right? And I think there's a lot of things that as we've kind of continued to scale, it's like, wow, here are some things that, this maybe was working 6 months ago, and it seems really wild that in 6 months, like we've already kind of completely outgrown something, but we're going through the stages of development of a company so quickly. It can be, it's challenging, right? And that sort of kind of growth is difficult, and you have to kind of really be intentional about maintaining kind of the culture that you developed as a company, kind of maintaining that, focus on the patient, maintaining all the things that have made, a company that has made 30 Madison as successful and I think special as it is. When you're moving as quickly as you are, you have to just be extra intentional about that. And it only gets more difficult, right, as you continue to scale. So it's something that, is on my mind, on Steve's mind, I know on a lot of our leaders' minds a lot. And it is something that I think will always be something that we need to continue working on, no matter no matter kind of what size we're at. And something that I'm learning, I mean, geez, it's something, I think what's been really, another exciting thing about this space and being, an outsider to healthcare when we came in, right? don't have a background in that. Steven, neither of us did. And when we came in, we really view ourselves, we view 30 Madison as a healthcare company, a consumer company, and a technology company, right? And I think what makes, when we really when the magic of 30 Madison comes to life, it's when those three sides kind of really are in harmony together, right? And I mean, like, I continue, it's really, even, it's been more than 4 years that we've been doing this, but there are still parts of the industry that I learn totally new things about all the time. And I think that when you kind of get that, really seeing that it's not about going so deep into just the consumer side or just the technology side or just the healthcare side. It's about bringing all of those three pieces together at the right balance. And that's where you can create something, more revolutionary that really can kind of change the way things are done. And I think that's something that we've realized. And sometimes when we get into a room and we say, wait, this meeting's out of balance, right? Like, what's kind of going on? And it's been something interesting. And I think when when we have that realization, we get that balance right, is when we have these really amazing outcomes. And it's something that I would say, we all kind of learn from each other within each of these kind of different areas, and kind of that's when we've been able to kind of create things that are really special. And I think it's something that, again, we try to be more intentional about, so we can kind of get that more often.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think that's a really nice transition into just like time management, and how you spend your time. For someone who's an outsider to healthcare, how do you expedite learnings and like sort of absorb as much as possible? Like, you have this business that is running with different verticals and different sub companies doing their own thing, but then I'm sure you're thinking to the future of like, what else can we solve for? Where else can we go from here in order to help more people with chronic conditions? So how do you really like divide your time in a given day, thinking about what's working and what's not with the existing businesses, and then thinking ahead to, kind of propel yourself forward in the healthcare space?
Yep. I mean, one thing has been like, I would say two things kind of coming into a space like healthcare as someone who wasn't there is, one is you have to immerse yourself in it, right? Like, for example, one thing was like when we were starting, when the company was just Steve and myself, and we were going to start on healthcare. I mean, we wanted to know, start on hair loss. We wanted to know everything, right? We read multiple textbooks about hair loss and restoration. We spoke to every dermatologist we could. We immersed ourselves in it to become, to ramp as much as we could. But then also you have to kind of know what you don't know, right? And know that you're not going to know everything, and make sure that you bring in people that know more than you, right? And so I think so that was something that was important, where we've been able to become, experts in the areas that we, need to be, but also, surround ourselves with folks that really know different areas. And I think that's where, when I think about kind of how we spend time today, the way we've kind of thought about the company is, you're right, we do have, each brand is unique, but we're also one company. One of our values is one team. So I think something that we've done is really bring in really strong leaders to kind of, be the kind of GMs, be the heads of each of our businesses, right? Which we call business units or BUs. But really kind of make sure, and something that I try to spend time on, is making sure that we continue to think about it through the 30 Madison lens of one company, and how we can kind of continue to make the overall ecosystem that we're building stronger, right? And that's how, I talked about why, we did migraine as a second condition, and that we started with hair loss. We wanted to kind of show that here was a condition where there was not access, where it wasn't working, where we wanted to demonstrate that the care model would work. And we think about that as we kind of, when we're starting to think about the next set of conditions as well. So a lot of it is, we've kind of had these proof points, right? I believe that each of the businesses that we're in right now could be, massive, billion-dollar businesses in their own right. But that's not why we do them, right? We do them to kind of, as we think about 30 Madison overall, we want to kind of have a condition that's relevant for everyone in this country to start, and beyond that over time, but over the next few years. And how do we kind of tie those together? So, something I kind of spent time on now is thinking about, what does make sense to go into next? And then how do we kind of deliver what we do today at 100x the scale, right? Because it's amazing to be able to kind of provide, the experiences that we do. But, unless we're able to do that for millions and millions of people, we're not going to be able to have the impact that we have. So I think a lot about how do we scale, right? And how are we going to be able to take what we do today and do it at 100x? Because that's just a whole nother kind of set of challenges that I think we need to be thinking about now so that we are ready to do that. Because, like I said before, the business is growing really fast, and we need to make sure that we keep up with that. So it's a big focus.
Yeah, that might be a nice segue to the question around, what do you believe that most people would disagree with you on? Because I'm sure that if you're thinking about something like scaling this business 100x, there are certain assumptions or things that are informing your thesis on the market that is maybe a little bit different than like what other folks are thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, something that I think, and and something that we've been saying now for years, and is still, I think, before people were like, okay, yeah, no way, and now I think we're trying to get people there. But I think something that we think that one of the first things I said, what is 30 Madison's vision, is to be that premier healthcare company for people with chronic conditions. And we're very intentional about that phrase, right? Premier healthcare company, not premier digital health company, not premier telemedicine company. We really believe that telemedicine, digital health can be, the best place to treat a lot of conditions, and conditions that, today people maybe would think there's no way that can be treated via telemedicine. An analogy that I like to use to kind of bring this to life is from like the entertainment world, right? If you think about, and it's totally different, but I think it kind of brings it to life, right? And if you think about, when these companies like Netflix and Amazon Prime and these sort of things first came out, everyone said, okay, yeah, they put out a lot of content, but, it's just for people that are binge watching and that sort of thing. But now, what are the studios that get the most Oscars and the most Emmys, right? It's these things, right? It's these kind of like disruptor things. And at first people said, no, leave real entertainment to, Paramount and stuff like that. But no, it's now you see the quality there. And I think if you kind of take that kind of line of thinking, bring it to digital health, when, we'll know we've succeeded when people say, like, where's the best place to treat your migraine, right? Where is the best place to think about, your IBS or your IBD, or, how do you kind of really address these serious conditions? It's not, maybe one of these big, academic medical centers, but it can be 30 Madison, right? It can be digital health. So it's not about, access is important to us, and it's about making sure that anyone has access to this care. But it's not just that anyone has access to care, it's that anyone can have access to the best care, right? And that's where kind of, I think something that a lot of people often will say, well, are you talking about expanding access and making it cheaper, or are you talking about better quality? And I don't think that there's that trade-off is necessary, right? And I think that's where the kind of magic comes in. And that's something that I think we have to continue to prove, to kind of show that it can work, and it can work at scale. But I really believe that you don't have to make that trade-off. And that's how, down the road, we can be that premier healthcare company and be it for everyone.
It may have made sense for me to ask this earlier, but like when you think about like this umbrella term of even chronic conditions, like what do you think the healthcare system has gotten wrong to date where people are struggling with these chronic conditions? And I know something like migraine is very different than IBS, but are there learnings that you're seeing as an entrepreneur or founder running these different business units on what was systemically done wrong, that where people have these chronic conditions? Like, why is it?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things is, look, some chronic conditions, are things that you're not necessarily, with today's technology, always able to cure, but you can manage. But a lot of times for people, they are they are not being managed, right? They are kind of out of control. And I think one of the reasons it's kind of, as I was talking about the exploration that Steve and I went through when we were first thinking of the concept, and we said, wait, how do you treat a condition, right? How do you kind of figure out, well, you have to, as the patient, you have to piece together so many things, right? First, you have to, often depending on your insurance, sometimes you have to go to your primary care doctor. You have to get referred to a specialist. You have to find a specialist and then find one that takes your insurance and get an appointment. And then you have to go figure out what medication you're going to take is, and does your pharmacy benefits allow you to take that drug, or do you have to get another one? Everyone's had that experience. You're on the phone with the pharmacy, you're on the phone with your doctor, you're calling your insurance, you don't even have enough phones, you're borrowing your friend's phone to try to figure it out, and nothing fits together. And as a result, it's not seamless. And I think something that we saw that was systemically wrong is, and that's why we decided, no, we're not building a telemedicine company. No, we're not just building a pharmacy. No, we're not just building kind of a tracking app. We're building the best place to treat migraine, the best place to treat your GI conditions. That's what you need. And it needs to be, a single place that's integrated and seamless for the patient, right? And that's where kind of like, I think one of the things that we kind of realized that now kind of just seems when you look at one of our experiences, you kind of go, of course, right? But you think about your experiences in the traditional healthcare system, it's never seamless. None of the pieces talk to each other. No one kind of knows what's kind of going on across this. And when you think about chronic conditions and why they are often not managed well, it's because it's hard for the patient. So much is put on the patient to kind of be able to put these things together. And as a result, things often get dropped, right? Or things get missed, or you don't know where to go next, right? Or you don't get your question answered, you're not able to get your refill or things like that. And there's all these little things. And often with a lot of these conditions, it really has to be just right. And it can be like little things that go wrong and they kind of add up. And that's what kind of causes, say, a flare up or things like that. And that's what, we believe that this kind of integrated care model that we have can be really powerful in providing a totally different and in our belief superior standard of care.
So do you see, I guess, last question, this has been awesome. Do you see a world where folks are still seeing, like, where do you see the future of healthcare? Like, is it this hybrid where people have a in-person primary care physician that they see, maybe over a course of their life? Is it more concierge where people are paying this like membership, like a One Medical outside? What do you think is going to dominate and win in healthcare longer term?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think that it's really, I think, exciting to see some of the innovation that's happening in the primary care world. We are not primary care. We view us as a specialist, right? And I think something that we see is like, and I think I'm in healthcare, and I'll be the first to admit I don't actually have a primary care physician, right? And I think a lot of people, don't these days, and not because they maybe aren't like focusing on it, but it's not seamless, right? So look, I think that there's going to be, more of these kind of experiences that kind of, and what I think you'll see is that, and what will need to happen is things that are kind of, that come together where it makes it more seamless and easy for the patient to manage their care, right? There is a need for primary and preventative care, right? There is a need for specialist level kind of virtual care that we have. There is a need for in-person care, right? I don't know that, you mentioned, is someone going to have an in-person primary care doctor that they go to all the time? I'm not sure it'll be in-person. I don't think it necessarily needs to be there, but there are certainly things that do need to be in person, right? And, I want to be clear, like, we don't believe that like virtual can do everything, right? But we believe virtual can be kind of that primary channel, right? And like, telemedicine's that primary channel. But if you think about a condition like, for example, in GI, there are certain times where you need to get a scope done, right? That doesn't happen virtually today, maybe someday in the future, but not today, right? And I think that like, it's kind of about figuring out how do you make it seamless for the patient, and you can have these different kind of homes for the patient. And that's why we believe, we're not stopping at the 4 conditions that we are in today. We want to kind of go, we want to kind of think about what are the most, prevalent and kind of impactful chronic conditions where the current standard of care is just not acceptable. And how can we introduce something that's better, more affordable, and kind of drives a better outcome. And then over time, how do kind of those things get linked together? So I think you're going to have these kind of different homes for people. There can't be too many of them because that's not seamless, right? And it needs to be seamless. But I think you'll see that, and I think you'll have I am interested to see kind of what happens on this kind of primary / preventative care, right? As people think more about kind of like, and labs and stuff gets easier to do, right? And what that will do in terms of helping kind of identify things earlier on, and then get people to a specialist, or some of the kind of services like we offer more quickly, so you can get something under control earlier. And then that often means kind of maybe you can stay on a first line treatment or things like that. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, look, I think there's no shortage of innovation right now, and some things will work better than others, but I think it's we're bullish on the space overall, and especially in really kind of thinking about how do you put the patient at the center of it? How do you kind of make it a good, like I said, an enjoyable experience, and focus on the outcomes. And I think that's where you're going to see the stuff that's really game changing.
Amazing. Well, really excited to see what you guys do after these first couple brands and business units or companies under your belt. Really appreciate you coming on to share your perspective. It's going to take a lot of companies and folks like yourself to change the system and get it going in the right track. So thank you, Demetri, for coming on and sharing your perspective and what you're building at 30 Madison.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Really, really enjoyed it.
Yes. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.